So welcome everyone to the Life Bulb seminar featuring one of our community managers for Transplant Life. So welcome, Taryn. It's really a pleasure to have you here. And obviously we speak so often that, but I'm really looking forward to learning more about you, and not only about your history with transplant, but also what makes you tick and outside, because life is more than being a patient, which I think we emphasize a lot here at Life Bulb. I'm Taryn Ienberger. I'm the CEO of Life Bulb, and I, similarly to Taryn, I also have a kidney and a pancreas transplant, so we share that as well. So why don't I just start, Taryn, please, first of all, welcome, and I'd like you to share a little bit about your transplant story, your journey, and then we can go into more detail about that, as well as other aspects of your life.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. I feel so honored to be able to have this opportunity. I'm Taryn Servold. I live in the Denver, Colorado area, and I had a kidney and a pancreas transplant in August of 2022. That the need for transplant stemmed from years of type 1 diabetes. And I find connection in dates. And so I was told that I would need a transplant August 19th of 2020. And then I was transplanted on August 14th of 2022. So the dates were very similar there. And, when I was listed, they told me you could be listed for generally 1 to 3 years. So I thought it was really interesting how it was so close to 2 years on the date. Yeah. And then I was released from the hospital on August 19th of 2022. So, there's connection there. Sometimes you find the humor in things like this. So my transplant, it was very easy. I say, I was prepared for very difficult surgery. And not to say that it wasn't a hard surgery, but, I was prepared for not being able to move. I didn't know what to expect. And part of that is probably because I tried not to focus on those things. I tried to just take it as it came. And I remember, being in the PACU after surgery and being really sad that I couldn't keep my eyes open. And I remember my dad saying to me, "You have only been off of anesthesia for like less than an hour. I think it's okay." And then, being asleep again after that. And then waking up in the hospital and immediately looking for my insulin pump or what my blood sugar was. And of course, my medical team knew. They had been monitoring my blood sugar, but I didn't have that insulin pump laying on the bed next to me or attached to my clothing or anything like that. And that was a really surreal feeling of panic and amazement at the same time.
Now it's 2 years, right? You said you had it done, 1 year. 1 year.
Yeah. Yep.
1 year. Do you still, because for me, I had my pancreas in 2010, so that's 13 years. But when I leave my home, I still look twice and I think, did I put my pens and my blood sugar measurements in my bag? And especially when I go on a trip overnight, I think about it. Did I bring it? Do I have it? And as a secondary, but actually something that probably will always be with me, is that I always have snacks with me.
Yes.
Always keep snacks. And if there are snacks somewhere that you can get for free or that you can buy that are appropriate for me, I always get it, because I kind of like a hamster in that sense. Because I'm still so worried that, number one, I don't have my equipment with me. And number two, that I would go low and I didn't have anything in my bag that could make me stabilize again.
Yes.
wondering, do you have any of those feelings?
Every day, every single day. It was kind of a joke around my office that I was always, the person with the snacks, because I have more than I would theoretically ever need. I just had like a drawer full of just snacks in my desk at all times. And when I returned to the office, someone said, "So does this mean that you're not going to have snacks anymore?" And I opened my purse, and granola bars just kind of like went exploding out of it.
Yep.
Because it's very true. I still to this day carry fast acting glucose gel. It's just in my bag. It's like a safety blanket, or it's in my car. Especially because I didn't have hypoglycemic awareness, and I had some pretty serious episodes there. And so it's very concerning for me. And then on the flip side of that, every time I eat something, or if I'm going to have something that's maybe a little bit more carb heavy or higher in sugar, which I didn't typically allow myself to eat, I get a lot of, I don't want to say anxiety, but I get a lot of anxious feelings around, am I going to be able to eat this? How much insulin am I going to need for this? What is this going to do? How am I going to react?
That is and I tell you, I'm 13 years out, I still have that. And I avoid things because it makes me feel, and I don't know if it's psychological, it has to be psychological, but I mean, I just don't feel good. It's like my skin is feeling too tight. And I know I'm not hyperglycemic. Like I am not. I measure. I measure. I mean, I had an episode like last week. I traveled together for Life Bulb, and I said, I feel strange. I feel like I'm flushed. I feel like my skin is not fitting. I need to get a glucometer, and I didn't have one with me because I don't really carry one anymore.
Sure.
And go to a CVS of some sort and just buy one to make sure that I wasn't hypoglycemic. So I don't think you've been so ingrained in our system. But it's pretty fantastic when you see the numbers and you just live without it.
Yeah. It's pretty incredible. And I think just after Thanksgiving, I allowed myself a slice of pumpkin pie, which had been my favorite. And obviously, since having chronic kidney disease, pumpkin's pretty high in potassium, so it wasn't something that I ate. And I still very closely monitor my potassium now. But I allowed myself a full sugar slice of pumpkin pie, and as rewarding and delicious as it was, it made me a little bit nervous, because I didn't ever remember having a time where I had a piece of, quote unquote, regular pumpkin pie like that.
Yeah. No, I think that's one of the, I mean, it's such a, like, it's a problem. It's not a problem like passing out or a problem like getting kidney disease, but it is a little bit of a problem, especially socially. And we have a question from the audience asking, what are our respective A1C levels? What were our levels after transplant? Obviously, after transplant, it comes down later on because the A1C will take about 3 months to change and to be modified. But I don't know if you want to share yours. It's not necessary, but we could say they're normal. And
mine at the time of transplant, the day of my transplant, mine was 7.2, which was pretty consistent for me. And then after transplant, 3 months after transplant, it had come down to about 6.5. I had a little bit of rejection early on after my transplant. So I had a little bit, because I couldn't give up monitoring my blood sugar, we found the rejection and a blood clot very early on. So we were able to treat that. And so 3 months after, my A1C had come down to 6.5. And now I had it checked about a month ago. It's 5.5.
That's great. That's
so
great.
It's, still within that range where they watch it pretty closely, right? It's right on the edge of what's considered like pre-diabetes. So it's a little bit higher than what someone who has never had any treatment.
Are you on steroids?
I am. Yep. I'm on prednisone.
That affects it. I can tell you, I'm not, and I think the hospitals just do it differently. The steroids will keep you a little bit higher. And
Yeah.
steroids, induce type 2 diabetes. So that's why I think this continuation of managing diet like you do, and obviously doing exercise and everything you can to manage your blood sugar is great. And people said to me afterwards, they said, oh, now you can eat cake, you can eat sugar, you can eat whatever you want. I'm like, I just got a new pancreas. I'm going to take care of that pancreas really well. It's not going to develop type 2 diabetes now just because I have a new pancreas. I already suffered through the deterioration of the first one.
Yes. And I think I have talked to many people about this. I think, sugar just generally makes you not feel good. And having lived a lifestyle where, I didn't eat a lot of it, although that's, there's a lot of, I'll say, misconception around, me needing a kidney transplant and how I was managing my diabetes and what my diet looked like prior to.
Taryn, because I think that's a huge misconception, and it's really important to set that straight, right? First of all, type 1 and type 2, what's the difference?
Type 1 is completely insulin dependent, right? So your pancreas makes no insulin whatsoever. And I'm kind of dumbing this down a little bit, but type 2, your body doesn't utilize the insulin that you do make, if any. So you have to use some different medications to help absorb that insulin that you may be making, and you may not be making enough of it. So then you have to supplement with an injectable insulin.
Right. And this whole misconception that you kind of got to this position due to your own failure in managing your disease, right? That is just really unfair, right? Because type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease. It affects the vasculature, severely, right? So, and the areas of the body where you have the smallest vessels that are the most affected by blood sugar variation, in the back of the eye and in the kidney. So those are the organs where you often see damage. After 10, 20 years with type 1 diabetes, most people have damage. And it just is unfortunate in some people. There's a genetic component to accelerate this, and you get kidney disease. And I just think that there's a certain fortune for both of us. I think that we were both healthy and young enough when we developed kidney disease so that we could also get a pancreas, right? I guess the one point that, it's not good for us to get kidney disease because no one wants that. But if we were to get it, this was a good time because we were also going to be able to survive or to deal well with a pancreas transplant, which is a very, very difficult surgery.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Well, great. So one of the things that changed, obviously, for you was that you no longer were a diabetic. Big change. What about the kidney disease? When you got your new kidney, how did that affect you, or was that more secondary?
That for me felt a little bit more secondary. So I was pre the dialysis when I received my kidney. So I wasn't on any sort of like fluid limitations or anything like that. And living in Colorado, I drink a lot of water. It's very dry here. I always have. So I didn't have to adjust there. And I tried to still maintain the same, kidney smart diet, so to speak, because I want to protect the kidney that I have. Now, does that, right after my surgery, they came in and I was finally, after a few days, I was finally allowed to eat real food, right? And what do you want to eat? And I wanted a BLT sandwich with a slice of avocado. That's what I wanted, and it's very salty. There's a lot of potassium in it, things like that. But that was what I wanted. And, I remember the nurse saying, lots of people order like a steak or something, and that doesn't appeal to me. I'm not a red meat eater anyway, but I just wanted, I wanted nice crisp bacon and fresh lettuce and tomato, and obviously not something I'm going to eat all the time, but I didn't, it was amazing to just not have to think about the carbohydrates that were in the bread and the tomato and, the fat that came with the avocado and how that was going to affect my blood sugar. And I think I
need so much thinking, right? I mean, one of the biggest issues with both kidney disease and diabetes is that there's a constant management and calculation of how not only to eat, but how to do exercise, how to manage your day, when to go to sleep, how to plan your pills. I mean, we can talk about transplant. Transplant has a lot of pills, but there's a lot of management that you don't have to do anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about a day with diabetes, how many decisions do you think you had to make during a day regarding your blood sugar and your insulin dosing?
Oh gosh. I mean, if you, at a minimum, at least once an hour, at a very minimum.
I can tell you, Taryn, when they've done research, they say it's about 200 decisions a day.
Yeah.
So it is little variations like, okay, can I do that? Can I do this? How am I feeling? Is this going to affect me? It's dramatic.
It is.
Doing that's why, you suddenly have all this space, right, to do great things. And one of the great things that you've been doing for a long time, right, is advocacy in diabetes.
Yep.
And you have taken that now into also advocacy and transplant. Do you want to talk a little bit about your role in advocacy, both in diabetes and now in transplant?
Yeah, I volunteered with the American Diabetes Association for many, many, many years. I, even as a small child with diabetes, I found it really important to have a sense of community, because I think it's very easy, especially with an invisible disease, to feel really siloed and feel like you're the only one. And just like you said, you're making 200 decisions a day. You're thinking about things, but you're not expressing that out loud. People don't see you necessarily staring at your plate and thinking, okay, what's in this and what do we have following this? I mean, I can remember going on a date with my husband and sitting down when we were dating and sitting down for dinner, and then we were going to walk, the outdoor mall, and that plays into your decisions. Am I going to take enough insulin? Am I going to take too much insulin? Are we going to stop for ice cream? Am I having a glass of wine with this? There's so many decisions there that have to be taken into account. And not having someone else sitting at the table there with you to just say, you're doing a great job, or don't forget about this, or, don't worry about it, I understand, makes a huge difference. And so my involvement with the American Diabetes Association and people living with diabetes was really focused around type 1 diabetes.
So type 1 diabetes genetic. We have a question from the audience.
It can be, and there's a lot of research right now that say that it follows like the father's genetic line. In my case, I'm the lucky one. Hi, it's me. I'm the only one in the family.
Me too. 90% of people with type 1 have no one in their family. It's called de novo. They have no one in their family. So 10% of people who have type 1 diabetes have someone in the family. And there are clusters, like where the parent, the child, the grandparent, even like location wise, there can be clusters. But so type 1 diabetes has a genetic component. You have to have this certain HLA type, but then there's an environmental component, and then there's a stress. So there are things that will kind of trigger type 1. Anyway.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see. They're saying that the stress from COVID, whether it's actually from receiving the disease itself or just the environment, is resulting in more diagnoses of type 1 diabetes in children.
So true. There's this enormous increase in diagnosis of type 1 diabetes after COVID in those who had COVID, right?
Yeah.
So that's another reason for vaccination.
Absolutely.
Absolutely vaccinate children, because in certain vulnerable populations where there is a genetic component, which by the way is pretty prevalent, especially in Caucasian, in the Caucasian population. Type 1 diabetes is more prevalent in the Northern European population. And if you then have also COVID, it increases your risk. So absolutely. Anyway, I think someone should do a podcast or write a story about a date with type 1 diabetes, because it's really interesting when you started going through that. Here you are with this person that you kind of want to impress, but also want to evaluate in a way, like, is this going to be a possible partner for me or not? I want to be on my best behavior, but also I want to be, really cognitive. I want to be here, I want to be present. And at the same time, you're like, okay, can I eat that? Do I need to eat that? Are we going to go for a walk afterwards? Are we going to go and get ice cream? That's a really interesting case of how diabetes affects you.
Yeah.
Anyway, so your advocacy, type 1 diabetes with American Diabetes, and now you've been working in transplant.
Yeah. This is an interesting space for me because kind of like we talked about before, where it's not fair that there's, accusations for people who receive transplant. So I haven't broadly shared my transplant story with everyone I know. And I had to work through my own, mental health regarding that. And I think that's very important. And so I found Transplant Life when I first found out that I was listed, and sort of, paid attention, did my research. You and I made a connection. And then after my transplant, I realized actually when I was walking the floors of my, post-transplant, they ask you to get up and walk around and things like that. When I was walking around, that while I was not the youngest person on the floor by any means, I felt very alone in that space. Now, I was in the hospital. It was 2022. We were all still wearing masks. I had no immune system at the time. I was supposed to be alone in that space. But I didn't, physically, I was supposed to be alone, but I didn't feel like I mentally needed to be alone. And I think that the community and having just people who get it, people who understand that some days you just don't feel good, and some days you just don't want to talk about it. And some days you're living, but you're kind of barely living because there's all these other things that are happening, and maybe you have lab work coming up, or maybe you just had labs and the results were different than you were expecting. There's a lot there. And so I think that being able to have a community of people who just understand and have just a sense of like friendship. Yeah. They see you, they hear you, they understand you, or they've been there and they can say, I've been there, I get it, you'll come through this, or this is how I came through this. Not offering medical advice, obviously, but personal experience goes a really long way. And so I think that is where that's where my heart belongs, is making sure that people feel accepted in the space that they're in, and that they also have, maybe they want to talk about something and they don't want to talk about it with their friends because their friends don't understand, but they have a space where they feel comfortable.
Yep, I hear you. I think there's a journey for that as well, like how open you are about your condition, and then there's a time and place to share it, because you don't want to become that person who's always talking about yourself, right?
Right.
Yet there is a need to seek help, right? So it's really very important, I think, to be very honest but I think having individuals around you who can kind of read you before you even have to go really far and disclose all your feelings is helpful.
Yeah.
Because you feel very much alone. I had the same. I mean, one of my biggest asks when I went through this was to find one person. I wanted to find one person, someone who had gone through what I was going to go through, that I could just have a little hand holding. And I remember, I mean, I was so into the science and into the doctors, and I understood it, and then, learned, and you too, I mean, both of us very analytical. And, but when I got out from the hospital, I just couldn't stop throwing up, and I had such nausea. It was terrible. And it was another patient who kept telling me, this is what you should eat. This is when you should eat. This is when you should take the drugs. And it helped. And the doctors just didn't, first of all, they were not so worried about it because it didn't affect my levels. This was just a nuisance, but it didn't affect my kidney or my pancreas. So they were fine, but it affected my quality of life, but they didn't know how to address it. So I do think that, yes, there's a need for support. There's a need of kinship, that you know someone who's similar to you, but they're also practical kind of hacks that are only known to those who have lived the experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, in my role here, I've learned so much from other people, because, I didn't realize all of the not negativity, but all the side effects that could happen from the medications. Yes, the pharmacist came in. Yes, they told me, all of the details there. But unless you're taking those medications every day, sometimes you just don't know what it feels like, or how to handle that, or having someone say to you, try eating this at this time and then taking your medicine, or anything like that. You just don't know those things without living that life.
Right.
And then I think that, companies, pharmaceutical companies, care providers, med tech industry, all of that, they listen when there are people behind it, not just one person speaking up. And so I think that the community has to come together and be informed, and be educated and advocate for one another. And I think that's huge.
Could not agree more. I think that's beautifully said. I mean, we need to come together. There's no reason, and this is what I like about Transplant Life. I think the community is very supportive, and I think any one person can articulate the need, and then we all do things. We can all pick our battles, right? But we need to have an approach that brings the whole group with us, right? So I think that there's power in the scale, and of course also the scale, or the large numbers, will make us more informed, because if you only have that one person who says, oh, I have that problem, but then another person says, well, I don't have that problem, then there is no problem, then it's an individual problem.
Right.
But say everyone has the same problem, then we can actually go and say, well, this product that you developed, it really needs modification, or it needs to be instructed differently when you take it, so that other people don't have to suffer from this. And that to me is also, I think we often say, as transplant recipients, we're so grateful, right? We're really grateful to the donors, the providers, everyone in this industry. I mean, we're grateful, and we have to be, we should be. And we want to give back. And I think one way of giving back is to kind of form these kind of groups, and try to make it even better for the next person who goes through a transplant.
Absolutely. Because even reading other people's stories, and how it varies. I read a story about someone who received a kidney transplant from their sibling 50 years ago, and it was still successful and things like that. But the procedure that they went through at the time, and how it has changed. And I just think, my story, or your story, or anyone's story will be important for 15, 20, 50 years down the line as well, because us sharing our story motivates the engineers behind making new procedure devices. It motivates the surgeons to learn new technology, new techniques. It motivates the pharmaceutical companies to make, better quality of life medications, things like that. And so voicing our opinion and our experiences it's invaluable. And you have to have the right community to do it in, because just like you said before, you don't necessarily want to make it all about you. We want to make it all about us.
I think you said it beautifully. Our stories are all important, and coming together and really bringing them out to the world, as a group, versus, again, just wanting to be known for your story, and essentially just making sure that you're a celebrity because of your story. That's not what we're about. What we're about is to try to change the world for the future, and also to create a legacy. I mean, there is legacy here. We went through something for a reason. I said it in my Thanksgiving, I think, post. If you're a chronic illness person, you sometimes have doubts, right? What is the purpose of all this? Why am I going through all this? What's the reason? What did I do in a previous life, or did I hurt someone? Why am I fighting so hard when other
Yes.
people don't seem to be fighting as hard? First of all, everyone is fighting. Everyone is fighting something. We all have problems. But for me, the reason is that I want to make it better for someone else, right? Or for a lot of other people. And that makes it, at least there is a purpose for
Yeah.
what we went through. Any final comments to our community or to those who are not yet part of it and may want to join?
To those who are not yet part of it and may want to join, that's okay. I was that person, right? I stood in the back and watched for a while before I made myself known, before I introduced myself. Empower yourself with the information. Know what information to take in. There's a lot of it out there, right? And for me, taking in information, I had to do it in certain waves. I'm a big fan of data. I'm a big fan of facts. And I wanted to know the details. I didn't want to know necessarily the opinions. I didn't want people casting accusations. So find that space where you can. I think that Transplant Life is that space. I was very comfortable there, and I received the information that I needed to feel confident going into my surgery. And then this is not political, but this is my saying, kick ass.
I love it.
Because that's what we're here. That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Kick ass.
Absolutely. That's what we're doing every single day. And we're going to continue standing.
Exactly.
Thank you, Taryn.
Thank you.
Conversation, and I hope that the listeners did as well. And it's archived on transplantlife.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.